Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid are the top two draft day bargain deals at the tight end position. While Taysom Hill might be the most overlooked man in America, we discuss the best draft values at the tight end position on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We are going through all the best draft values this week. We've already hit on quarterbacks on Monday, running backs on Tuesday, wide receivers on Wednesday. Today, it's time to hit on the tight end best values. And with the Olympics going on, it's fun to just give them it by medals, right? Put them on the Olympic podium. Who gets the gold medal? Who gets the silver? Who gets the bronze? So, Vinny, let's start off with our gold medal winner. Who's the number one best tight end value in 2024 fantasy drafts?
Yeah, we do have a tie on the podium, and we've been doing this. We give out 6 medals here, so 2 golds, 2 silver, 2 bronze. I'm going to hand out my first one, and we've talked about this guy a lot, is Dalton Kincaid. And I still think he's a value at tight end 7, and he's going around 82nd overall, so 6th to 7th round, in some cases the 8th round. But he is the Bills' essential best target on the field in terms of just field stretching, making big plays. He might be the man here this season. Now, I know they did draft Keon Coleman, and they have him, but they have this massive amount of vacated targets from Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. They're also trying to work in Curtis Samuel behind Khalil Shakir. So when you go to the season with Coleman, Shakir, and Samuel as your receivers, and you got Josh Allen, you got to think twice about how you want to approach this, right? I mean, the most experienced receiver with Allen, you could say, is Shakir, but Kincaid is the upside guy, right? I mean, Coleman comes in cold. Samuel was on the Commanders. So you look at this, and the other thing that you factor in is that Joe Brady is going to use 2 tight end sets where him, Kincaid, and Dawson Knox are on the field quite a bit. And Kincaid is special. I mean, he's a hard guy to cover, and I think this is a copycat league, and that says the Bills may want to get that tight end going as their primary target. They've seen what the Chiefs have done. Where they have Travis Kelce, they pay Travis Kelce, they pay their quarterbacks, and kind of mix in their wide receivers to make some plays. So I think there's a sense of that it wasn't working. Targeting Stephon Diggs a lot, taking occasional deep shots, that wasn't working. So maybe they need to do short to intermediate, get the ball out of his hands quicker with Josh Allen so he doesn't take as many hits, take off and run when needed, but that says that short to intermediate is going to be a big part of their game, a lot more so than we've seen before, because, again, inconsistency with the deep threat definitely showed up last season. So it all comes back to Kincaid being a big factor all over the field. Someone's going to have to replace Stephon Diggs as kind of that security blanket. Remember, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs were very tight for a few years in their relationship. So I think that can rekindle here with Kincaid, and I think you totally cannot forget about Dawson Knox later. I think he's going to have a bigger role than people think, but I don't think it's going to be a role that cuts into what we're looking for in Kincaid in fantasy. It just has a lot of upside, and we've seen it with the young tight ends, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride. There's a lot of buzz around them as we try to mash them in to the top of the rankings with Travis Kelce and George Kittle and Mark Andrews, our old favorites. But don't forget about this guy. Second year is usually the big breakout year for tight ends of this caliber, and everything's lining up for Kincaid. So I love it as value, even at tight end 7, because I think, Michelle, he has tight end 1 overall potential in this offense. If he can score enough touchdowns, watch out for him. If Sam Laporta can be up there at the top of the rankings, why can't Dalton Kincaid?
Yeah, Kincaid could be even highly more targeted than Sam Laporta. Now, I think the news is going to start, I think that's why Dalton Kincaid's price is starting to slowly decline, which is what you wanted, right? Yeah. You've been saying Kincaid's price is getting a little too high for me, but it has over the last week slowly started to come back down a little bit because of the news that Dawson Knox is highly involved. He's going to be there. But like you mentioned, Dawson Knox could play a big role on the team, but still not hurt Kincaid in the
Right.
way of fantasy points. Like Kincaid's a bigger playmaker. Hopefully it's Kincaid that comes down with the touchdowns and not Dawson Knox. I think that's key there. But there's an opportunity in this offense to be Josh Allen's number one target, and Kincaid is in competition for that. So you love that from your tight end to have that ability to be the top target in a really, really good offense. Mine also has this ability. It's Kyle Pitts with the Falcons. And I was a little Kyle Pitts hater last year, but it's because he was stuck with Arthur Smith playing with Desmond Ridder. And like, I knew nothing was going to be better. Like, it wasn't just going to randomly get better last year for him with Desmond Ridder. But now he gets Kirk Cousins. Now he gets a new offensive system. I was always in on Kyle Pitts' talent. I wasn't in the situation he was in. But so now he's going tight end 6. He's still going, people are not dropping him too low over the last 2 terrible seasons for him, but still you can get him late 5th, early 6th round. And he's still, how is he only 23 years old, Vinny? He's still only 23 years old, and he doesn't turn 24 until October, which is just crazy to me. I know the last 2 years it's been like pointless for him in fantasy, but he also only 65% of Kyle Pitts' targets have been catchable over the last 2 years. That's the lowest such percent by a tight end during that span. And the only tight end with a sub 72 such percent. Again, he's at 65%. That's the 4th lowest such percent by any player during the span at any position. So Kirk Cousins is going to make that so much better. Cousins threw an uncatchable pass on just 13% of targets last year. That was the 2nd lowest in the league among quarterbacks, behind only Patrick Mahomes. So we know Kirk Cousins is going to give him good, accurate, catchable targets. And even with Kyle Pitts stinking it up in the stat column over the last 2 years, he still has the 4th most downfield receiving yards among all tight ends since 2021, since entering the league, behind only Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews. Downfield is just 10 plus air yards. He only has fewer than 50 downfield receiving yards than Mark Andrews. Like, he still makes these huge plays. Kirk Cousins knows how to throw it downfield. It's his strong suit. And I love this combo together. Drake London's also good, but Kyle Pitts could leave this team in targets, receptions, receiving yards. We'll see if the receiving touchdowns finally come, but he's had 1, 2, and 3. So maybe he has 4 this year, maybe he just keeps going up, but no, hopefully he can at least get in the end zone like 6+ times. But I think he's a really good value this year.
Yeah. And this is another guy that I think could finish at the top of the board. I mean, we liked our tight ends to be among the top 3 targets on their team. That's a very important thing. He's probably going to be top 2 or the top target, as Michelle mentioned, with Drake London, because they're still trying to figure out between Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore who's going to be that complementary 3rd playmaker that's going to show up the most, whether stretching the field or doing stuff after the catch. So we know Pitts can stretch the field and do that kind of stuff, so he can provide the big plays. I talked about Bijan Robinson being a key asset in the passing game, but he's not going to take away from what these guys do. He's a little bit different, right? They're going to design some plays to get him out of the backfield, but Drake London and Kyle Pitts are going to toggle between being their top pass catchers, and there's a lot of correlation between Kirk Cousins and the Vikings and that offense, this Falcons offense. This Falcons offense also was very run heavy, so not only do you have an accurate passer who can get the ball downfield, you're going to have higher volume. And let's keep in mind, at the end of the Matt Ryan days, Kyle Pitts sneakily had 1,000-yard rookie season. I think we forget about that. So he can easily get to 1,000 yards. And so that's one thing we're going to look at. That's already, we're in business here, right? For a tight end, get a few touchdowns with that, catch somewhere around 85 passes, you're in business as a potential tight end 1 overall. So I love Kyle Pitts this year, Dalton Kincaid. Again, there's just a feeling, okay, we haven't seen it yet, but you got to be patient. You got to be in the right offense, right situation with the right quarterback. I think both of these guys are certainly doing that here in 2024.
Yeah, and we had to think like TJ Hawkinson was so good with Kirk Cousins. Like Kirk Cousins is going to use a tight end position. It's going to be great. In our next segment, I'm going to tell you, like, if you're punting on the tight end position, your pick has to be Taysom Hill. It just has to be. And I feel like we're just way overlooking this guy with him going undrafted in most leagues. We'll discuss right after we hear from one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I've used this app so many times, whether I'm going to an Astros game or when I lived in Pittsburgh and I would just walk to the stadium at last-minute notice. Like, that's my favorite time to use the Game Time app, is when I have that FOMO and I'm like, I want to go to a game. And it's like, it's coming up soon, but I know if I jump on the Game Time app, they're going to give me the best prices. It's going to be so easy to use. I'm going to get to see my seats. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. You get to take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON, NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, I'm going to tell you about Taysom Hill. And I just want, I don't know if people are understanding. Maybe he's just getting thrown away because he's not the typical tight end, right? But right now he's going as a tight end 25. He's going undrafted. And we have spent this summer being like, ooh, if you put on the position, maybe you should take like Jonnu Smith or Mike Gesicki. Or like, we keep changing it up, right? But the answer is it's Taysom Hill. I mean, last year was his lowest year in a while. He averaged just under 8 fantasy points per game in half PPR, 12th among tight ends. But he really didn't start playing until about week 6. So he was playing very limited snaps until week 6. Then from week 6 through 18, he averaged 10.1 fantasy points per game. It's the same amount as Evan Ingram, who finished as a tight end 2 last year, averaged in 2023. In the 10 games he played at least 25 snaps last year, he averaged just under 11 points per game, 10.9 in half PPR. That was more than what George Kittle averaged last year. And then going on in the years prior, he was a tight end 7 in points per game in 2022, tight end 6 in points per game in 2021, and tight end 5 in points per game in 2020. He has scored 10 or more fantasy points in 23 games since 2020 over the last 4 seasons. That's tied for the fourth most among tight ends with TJ Hawkinson, behind only Travis Kelce, who has a gazillion games, Mark Andrews, who has 28 such games, and George Kittle, who has 27 such games. Again, Taysom Hill, who's 23. So he's just behind Mark Andrews and George Kittle. We have Juwan Johnson, their starting tight end for the Saints, dealing with an injury. We don't know when he'll be back. Dennis Allen is talking up Taysom Hill and saying he's going to be used all over the place. But like at the end of last year, they started to use him. He finished as the tight end 8, tight end 5, tight end 8, tight end 9 in 4 of the last 6 games of the season. Like, why is he going behind Chig Okonkwo, Cade Otton, Noah Fant, Ben Sinnott, who's a rookie, right with Jonnu Smith? Like, why are we just completely throwing away Taysom Hill when he ends as a top 10 tight end in average points every single year?
Yeah, I think this is the reason. I think there's just a feeling that Taysom Hill could break out for 120 yards rushing and like 3 touchdowns at any point, but he could also fall flat. So he's kind of like that figure skater that could land like 4 quadruple axels in a row, or he could just fall flat.
Would you rather a guy that has a really high ceiling, though, or a guy that falls flat every single week? Like,
yeah, I think here's
Fant?
The other factor with Taysom Hill, I mean, beyond just his usage as a tight end, is like, is this Saints offense going to be in transition a little bit? We have Clint Kubiak taking over as the offense coordinator. I think Dennis Allen's under a bit of pressure here. I mean, he's kind of had an extended leash kind of on his coaching tenure where they've not come through at all in this post-Sean Payton era. I mean, all the things they haven't worked as well. And I don't know if they're totally sold on podcast non-favorite Derek Carr. Like, I just don't know if they're going to just be satisfied with that offense. And we also have a guy from the 49ers who knew how to use Deebo Samuel in a hybrid role and move him around. So Yeah, Taysom Hill, the tight end, is interesting, but Taysom Hill, the runner, Taysom Hill, the receiver, as they use him in different spots, the quarterback in some wildcat looks, that's also something you have to consider. And also, another factor is you have Jamal Williams and a struggling Kendrick Miller behind Alvin Kamara at this point. They might need Taysom Hill to be a bigger factor in the running game to take some pressure off Kamara, who's got some good mileage on him. So if he's going to get some complimentary touches there, 10 to 12 touches, let's say, per game somehow, or opportunities, if we throw in the targets that he might get at tight end, then yeah, he has a chance to do things. I mean, whenever he gets the opportunity, that's really been the question, right? If he gets the opportunity, he comes through. But if he's an afterthought, they don't use him in those high leverage situations, give him the ball near the goal line, then he's not going to produce for us. So Taysom Hill, is quick, he's fast, he's strong. He is a usable player. It's just hard to know where you're going to use him on the field. But I think Kubiak is going to be a little bit better at doing that. If they use him like their version of Debo from San Francisco, then watch out. Then he can have good value. I still think he'll be tight end eligible among all those positions. That's kind of what he's designated as. And so he could have really good production that comes from other sources that other tight ends are simply not going to give you on top of what Michelle just broke down for you. So I do like that as a consideration. My guy I've been talking about, and look, I said that Kyle Pitts, I'm getting my head of myself. Kyle Pitts was freed from Arthur Smith, and therefore he's going to produce. Well, Pat Freiermuth could actually benefit from Arthur Smith, and here's why. And this is why I kind of mashed up two names here, because I was getting ahead of myself. Guess who had 50 catches for 582 yards and 3 TDs at tight end last year? It was Jonnu Smith with Arthur Smith. And that was a big factor cutting into Kyle Pitts' production. That is a lot, right? From a tight end that's on the field in a lot of 12 personnel cutting into Kyle Pitts. And again, I don't think they knew how to use Kyle Pitts as a hybrid kind of wide receiver. He shouldn't have been in line and doing that stuff, and he's not good at doing that. He is really like a wide receiver, but Jonnu Smith is a traditional, put him on the tight end line, and he's going to produce. That's what Pat Freiermuth is. Freiermuth in the previous offense was not on the field a lot. There was a lot of situations where they went 11 personnel or really go 10 personnel where they had 4 wide receivers and took him off the field, and he was not there in the previous offense. And that was not good. I mean, I think this guy is very good in the red zone. We've seen him produce. They're going to go back to some of the throwback things they did here with Freiermuth and just have him in line. He's going to be what he should be, like a new kind of version of Heath Miller. Like, get him out there, have him block, get the running game going. He can slide out and score some touchdowns here for you. I know we do not have a good history. I've talked about this with Russell Wilson and tight ends, but he hasn't also been in this particular style of offense. You have George Pickens. Where are the rest of the targets coming from? We're going to figure out with Roman Wilson if he gets healthy, but Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin are not going to do it. So they need to use Pat Freiermuth in leverage situations, playing off the running game, using him in the red zone. I think that's where it's going to be a big help here. And right now, Michelle had Taysom Hill, going down at tight end 25. Like, Freiermuth is actually higher than I thought at tight end 14. But again, I like him as a back end choice. This is not for the people who punt, but the people who are saying, okay, I'm not going to fill out tight end until my last starting spot. So when you look at that, you get him at 115 overall, which is 9th or 10th round. You fill out all your other starting positions, get some depth along the way. You're in good shape. And then just add Pat Freiermuth and maybe get a TJ Hawkinson, someone with upside later, or one of these guys we're talking about, or Taysom Hill. Put these two guys together, you're going to be in business at tight end, and it could even work out if you're in tight end premium leagues, and these are the 2 weight-on picks you have. You can get awesome values in both guys.
Yeah, I would much rather Pat Freiermuth than Dallas Goedert, who's going ahead of him, or picking David Njoku like 50 picks earlier, like 30 picks earlier. Like, I would much prefer that, or Dalton Schultz is going right next to him. I would rather Pat Freiermuth there as well. It sounds like Arthur Smith is using the tight ends heavily. Pat Freiermuth is having a very good camp. It sounds like Freiermuth might also get extended sometime soon here. So I think the Steelers have good faith in him. He dealt with a lot of injuries last year. Hopefully he can stay healthy, but I do agree. I think he is a solid value in drafts. I still like Taysom Hill about, 100 picks later because he's going undrafted. But Pat Freiermuth definitely will have more targets and receptions and hopefully a higher touchdown, like receiving touchdown ceiling. He definitely has that over Taysom Hill. We're going to get into our bronze medal winner, the third best tight end value in drafts, to end our show.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. And I'm sure you do too. But as the playoffs are behind us here in the NBA and NHL, it's kind of lull. We're waiting for NFL season to kick off. We actually get the Hall of Fame game. So if you want some action here, Bears Texans tonight should be a lot of fun here. Finally, we get real football on the field. We'll get college football soon. We have had fewer games now, but the games are coming, and the sports are going to be sportsing like we want them to soon. FanDuel is going to let you stay in the action while we're waiting for these real games. They keep the sports going wherever you want and I want, and all we have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime we're in the mood. We also have the Olympics. There's some events there that you can look at, some futures, all that good stuff that you can consider here for football. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Check it out. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. Again, get in on that MLB action because FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball as well. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, only at FanDuel.com. All right, Michelle, time to close the show. And I noticed you moved one guy down on the podium for Taysom Hill, so keep that in mind. And again, it seems like we have a lot of great tight end values. We said it might be a struggle to pick 6, but we ended up picking 6 pretty easily here. So give me your bronze medalist right behind your choices of Kyle Pitts and Taysom Hill on the podium.
Yeah, I ended up moving. I had Jake Ferguson as a silver medal winner, but I moved him down to bronze just because I don't know if he has. He finished as a tight end 9 last year overall, and he's going as a tight end 9 price this year. And I think he probably would only beat that by a few spots if he does. Like I'm projecting him to be better this year, but like at like tight end 5 probably is his ceiling, right? So at tight end 9 cost, it's still a nice value, but not a huge jump. So we have to remember, like last year was his first season as a starter in this league. He finishes as tight end 9 overall and in points per game. We should expect a tight end to get better as he gets more playing time, just like anyone else. And a big part of him only finishing at tight end 9, even though he was heavily involved in this offense, was because he only had 5 receiving touchdowns. And I also expect that to increase. I mean, he was being utilized in the red zone more than like any other player, especially any other tight end in the league. He had 23 targets in the red zone last year. That was tied for 5th most among all players, most among tight ends. He was only behind CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Calvin Ridley, and Tyreek Hill in red zone targets last year. And then also targets inside the 5-yard line. He had 9 targets. That was tied for 2nd most in the NFL, behind only teammate CeeDee Lamb. So it was like when they got near the end zone, it was CeeDee Lamb or it was Jake Ferguson. It's just Jake Ferguson. I mean, they weren't coming his way, but they're like they didn't come down with it. But like the regression's bound to happen. The positive regression is bound to happen there for his touchdowns, and we saw that immediately in the playoffs. He scores 3 times in the wild card run, right? Like we could have used those throughout the fantasy season. That would have been great. But they waited until the playoffs there for that regression to come through for him. But I expect that to happen this year. I'm not going to be surprised if he puts up 8, 10 receiving touchdowns. We know he's heavily involved in this offense. He was getting like his target share even went increased during the second half of the year. By almost every game in the second half of the year, he was getting at least 8 targets, like 8, 8, 8, 8, 6, 12. But like he was definitely a heavy part of this offense towards the second half of the year. Brandon Cooks is not getting any younger. And they didn't add really any other weapons. Like they're struggling right now to figure out who's going to be that third target in this offense. Is it going to be Brandon Cooks? Because we know CeeDee Lamb's going to dominate targets. I think Jake Ferguson's a clear number 2 target in this offense. And if he ends up scoring more touchdowns this year, he's going to really come through on that tight end 9 cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at Pitts, Kincaid, and Ferguson, maybe being the values that you're looking at early, and then you start looking at some guys later, and maybe skip maybe the elite names, look at these guys in the middle, and go a little later. The other thing you mentioned that this is very key is there's status quo with the Cowboys. I mean, really didn't upgrade the receiving core. They had some opportunities to do that. I know they're going to have higher hopes for Jalen Tolbert. We'll see what he does here. But again, it looks like a lot of CeeDee Lamb, a lot of Ferguson, a lot of Brandon Cooks, and it's the same offense. So there's no transition like we had last year from Kellen Moore to this situation with Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy. It is the same offense, same situation, same targets, those type of things. So I like all that with Jake Ferguson, and you're right. The touchdowns are the thing that could really push him up. Now, my guy, I'm taking a dart a little bit, and he's buzzed a little bit as a sleeper tight end. He's down there. He's my Taysom Hill, I guess, in terms of the value later in drafts, kind of forgotten. Tight end 20 right now, 157th overall, 14th round or later. So you're getting very close to your Mr. Relevant or penultimate pick for a lot of people in fantasy drafts here. So when you look at that, I see this as being a very good value in Cade Otton. And look, Cade Otton is not going to get anyone going here, but you look at the Buccaneers, what do they do with their third receiver? I mean, it's still a question mark. I mean, you have Trey Palmer still hanging around, but you also have a different offense with Liam Cohen coming over. No more Dave Canales here, and he had a great influence on the wide receivers, but Chris Godwin is slowing down a little bit. Mike Evans is Mike Evans. He's not going to compete with those type of targets because the outside field stretcher and red zone guy on the perimeter. But when you look at what Otton can do, work the middle of the field. He's got a little bit of juice to him. And keep in mind, he's a young tight end with a lot of talent in his class, much like we had Laporta come in and McBride and Kincaid. I mean, this guy was a very talented receiver at Washington. He just had to kind of put things together in the NFL and have a key role here. So, again, what did we say? Looking for a top 3 potential target on his team. And I think it's pretty close between him and Godwin. We don't like Godwin at all. We told you we'd like to take Deontay Johnson and some other people ahead of Godwin. Otton is young. He's got some field stretching ability of his own, working in the middle of the field. Liam Cohen had a little bit of that there with the Rams, using the tight ends a little bit better than we had with Canales. That wasn't a big part of what they did. They think they threw to Otton in certain situations. He's also a pretty good red zone guy for Baker Mayfield as well. So I do like it as a sleeper only because this offense is in transition. There's a variable there. We're not sure who the third target is. So, again, why couldn't it be Cade Otton? And I think there are a lot of great reports out of camp on him as well. So something to check out and see what his role is going to be. But, again, he's tight end 20. So if you're sitting there and you're saying, hey, who am I going to take? We told you who to take, Cade Otton or Taysom Hill. That's what you're going to look for in 20 to 30 in that range. Those are tight ends. We have mentioned Jonas Smith and Mike Gesicki and those guys, but those guys are almost undrafted. These guys you might need to draft later in your leagues just because they're somewhat names, right, that someone is going to take a shot on.
Yeah, I'm not on the Cade Otton train. I know you love him, and always like week to week, you always have
very like him. I don't want to say I love him.
He does have opportunity in this offense, but I do think it'll still go Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rachaad White are going to dominate the targets there, and then Cade Otton's going to kind of have to fight for that fourth role. And he's going to be very touchdown dependent, like Taysom Hill is. But I'm gonna stick with my take Taysom Hill take.
These are very low risk, high reward picks is the bottom line. I mean,
I got you.
And that's always good, right? Low risk, high reward is what we're looking for in fantasy for most part. And hey, you're going to get on the podium. It's a bronze medal. We're giving him third place. Yeah. It's fine.
We did it. We got through the tight end episode. I actually really like all of our tight end picks besides your last one there. But we did a good job. That is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, as Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow talking about the biggest news throughout training camp and how that impacts fantasy for this season. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.